why do you think the US had so many successful psycho serial killers between the 1970s and 1990s? So the so-called golden age of serial killers, 3,600 killers. I'm not sure about that number. Definitely around 1,000, maybe slightly less than 1,000. 36 seems a little inflated, but whatever. So you had the golden age of serial killers. Uh, Way more serial killers than any other country, even after considering per capita and high reporting numbers. Also, do US cops get away with almost anything? So the US is the nation that essentially invented serial killers, I think. I mean, nowhere else have you had so many serial killers like the US. I mean, the names are kind of legendary, in the nastiest of ways. John Wayne Gacy, um, Ted Bundy, and so many more. Okay, so these folks, I mean, these people were just inhuman monsters, and some of them had you know the number of people they killed went into the hundreds. Some of them. So why was this the case? You had There are reports of serial killers in other nations too. You had one very infamous serial killer in the USSR. I forget his name. Who was pretty monstrous, but it's the US that has given the world this entire thing, serial killer. So why did you have this situation? So many serial killers, all the way from the 1970s to the 1990s. So the US is an artificial nation. It's been settled by foreigners, right? By Europeans. And much of the US is just wide open, very low population density. So from the 1950s, so the Wild West era was from 1865 all the way to 1900. The Indians were properly subjugated. The Indians, as in the Native Americans, were properly subjugated around 1900 or so. You still had a few more rebellions, but by the time the West was mainly conquered, but the West was still the west of the Mississippi was still, you know, it still had a very low population density. And then by the 1950s, you had the explosion of suburbia, which means suburban neighborhoods, wide open neighborhoods with low population density, where you have all these houses. The baby boomers set up houses there. So you had low population density, you had the explosion of suburbs, you had high mobility, you had highways all across the country, so people traveling all the time. So it was not unusual for you to meet strangers. Most of the people very often you would meet would be strangers. That's one. Then you had, from the 1950s, 60s onwards, socializing became an outdoor kind of activity. People would spend time socializing in bars, in pubs or whatever. And over there, you would meet a lot of strangers. So it was not unusual at all to meet a person you've never seen before, and you would not feel uncomfortable. At the time, you also had rudimentary policing methods. You did not have databases of serial killers or criminals. You do not have fingerprint databases. You do not have DNA databases. The DNA fingerprinting technology did not even exist at the time. So, because of these factors, and you had mercury, you had lead in petrol, in gasoline. So there was a time when there used to be a lot of lead in the gasoline, petrol in the US, and that damages people's brains and causes criminal tendencies, apparently. So combination of these factors created high level of criminality in the United States, and the rise of serial killers. And then serial killers, this entire phenomenon of serial killer became a popular fiction, etc. kind of theme. And those stories that would come out in literature and popular fiction and TV series, they would then serve as templates for new serial killers for how to execute their whatever they were executing, their methodology. So because of this, from the 1960s, 70s onwards, all the way to the 1990s, you had this proliferation of these evil, psychotic monsters, serial killers all across the United States, some of whom are very famous or rather infamous. And from the 1990s onwards, the United States had constructed this database of criminals with their fingerprints, eventually DNA information data, all of that. And policing methods became more and more sophisticated. So from the 90s onwards, it was it became, and then you had the proliferation of CCTV cameras, and then with the advent of cell phones, it became easy to track anybody. Because of all these factors, eventually technology caught up, and then it became very hard for anyone to be a serial killer, which is why you have so few serial killers today. And even if you have serial killers, they don't they don't have too many victims before they're caught. So that was the phase the US went through, and it essentially is the nation that invented serial killers, more or less.